Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we'll be taking a look at the Call of Cthulhu scenario, My Little Sister Wants You to Suffer. Written by Paul Fricker and originally published in 2009 in the Cthulhu Britannica collection, and then in 2022 the adventure was given a few tweaks, updated to 7th edition rules, and re-released through the Miskatonic Repository program, which is the version that I ran. Though I will be using art from both versions, as art is just far more fun to look at than my face. The adventure is 20 pages and comes with 6 pre-generated characters to use. It's a science fiction one-shot adventure and has some really cool features. It's perfect for something like convention play because it is fully playable in just 4 hours because it's very good about pushing the action forward. When I ran this, I was tasked with running a highly lethal horror one-shot that a new player could play and feel comfortable with immediately, and this adventure absolutely delivered. It gives us a fun mystery, a very interesting setting, and is extremely lethal. I mean, you're all but guaranteed to lose a player character or two in this one. And it creates a fantastic sense of paranoia for the players while they're playing it, and it has one hell of a surprise. The setup is that the investigators awaken inside sleeping pods. They have no memory of who they are or how they got there, but figuring that out as well as why they were awoken is the adventure itself. Now, as it plays, the characters are going to slowly recover their memories. Not only their memories about themselves, but their memories about each other, and loyalties can quickly shift as certain secrets come to light. If I was going to compare this to any movie out there, I would say Pandora. So that's what we're going to talk about, my thoughts, my criticisms, and my suggestions as a game master who has successfully run this adventure.
And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm here to give it to you from a player's side of things as I try to figure out just what in the hell is going on around here, where I am, and who stole my freaking pants.
But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So any players in the audience, please stop here. But send your game masters this way to see about running the adventure for you. But if you keep going and you spoil yourself, my little sister will enjoy your suffering. Okay, Game Masters, let's dive in. The adventure comes with 6 pre-generated characters. The personal details about them, last name, age, occupation, etc. are all blurred out because part of the adventure is learning that information. The adventure recommends that you use these characters in order just depending on how many players you have. So if you have 3 players, you use the first 3 characters. If you have 5 players, you offer the first 5 characters, then just let your players choose among those which one of those they want to play. Now, for my game, because I was running this with the idea that at least one of my players was going to be completely new to Call of Cthulhu, I made a few minor tweaks to these sheets. I colored in the starting hit points and sanity rings, and denoted in red at which point the character's SAN falls below the 20% mark and they become indefinitely insane. I also blurred out the adventure's title because I didn't want them trying, to read too much into the adventure's name because, knowing them, they might be able to figure something out from that. I stuck a link below for anyone out there who wants to use any of the handouts or the assets that I made. Each character also has 5 core memories. They don't start off with these at first, but they will learn them over the course of the adventure. And one of those 5 core memories is an implanted false memory, and it's denoted in a different font, a subtle hint to the players how that memory just doesn't quite feel right. So before the game, I cut all of these out and placed them in individual envelopes with the characters' names written on them. So each player gets their character sheet and 5 sealed envelopes. And I didn't number them or anything like that. I even shuffled them around before I handed them out to the players. I did consider, though, putting a symbol in the lower corner of each envelope, like a square, a triangle, a spiral, or some sort of just random little squiggle, something like that. Maybe convince the players that, maybe those meant something or had some sort of deeper meaning behind them. But it ended up, having 4 players, and having just made 20 named envelopes, I got lazy and decided not to do that. Once each player has their sheet and their 5 envelopes, you're ready to begin. The adventure opens with the characters awakening. They're each inside a domed sleeping pod. Lights are flashing all around them. They're naked and have various wires and needles hooked into them, and all they're wearing is a lanyard with their name and their picture on it.
Mom? I don't want to go to school today. Hello? Where the hell am I? Who the hell am I? I don't remember nothing except a weird feeling that I have woken up in this exact same situation once before.
Emerging from their pods, the lights in the room come on, and a layer of dust coats the floor. Some of the pods are empty. One of them looks smashed with blood inside of it, another contains a dead body, and one has an occupant that's so drugged up that they can't be awoken. and another pod has a dead tentacle arm monster inside of it. A locker against one wall is open, its contents spilled on the floor. Among the items are some jumpsuits to wear, though one less jumpsuit than you have player characters, and the rest of the stuff is pretty random, like half a pack of cigarettes but no lighter, a 4-shot pistol, a seashell, 3 condoms, a cheap plastic pen, etc. Game masters are encouraged to add anything they want, so I added a 1-meter USB cable. I also printed all of these up and cut them out as cards that I then handed out to my players as they picked through all that stuff. Again, you can find any of the assets that I made at the download link in the video description below.
You also added a flask of booze. I mean, I didn't see one in all those cards that you passed out to us, so I made my own. After the wake-up that I had, yeah, I need this. Oh God, what is this, acetone?
Okay, so what's going on here is while this adventure is set in the future, it's not the distant far future, but a dystopian near future. The players believe that they've awoken on a spaceship that's full of aliens. The reality is that they're contestants in a life or death reality game show called My Little Sister, sort of a play on Big Brother, where they're to survive and escape for cash and prizes. The characters have all had their memories wiped through either drugs or hypnosis and believe they've woken up on a spaceship after some sort of cataclysmic war with creatures from beyond the stars who then rose from the depths of the ocean. So certain things are in this adventure just to screw with them, such as there being one less jumpsuit than there are people, and some of the random items that they found were submitted by audience members who can win a bit of a cash prize if any of the player characters find a good use for whatever crap it was they put in that pile. The mutant monsters are really desperate homeless people who've been surgically and genetically modified and just amped up on drugs in hope of making some money by killing a contestant on live television. So during the final battle, when a mutant killed one of my player characters and another character was half dead and injured and they were, gearing up and ready to attack this mutant, all of a sudden, that mutant then just ripped the head off the dead player character and held it aloft, screaming triumphantly, and just ran out of the room because, from its point of view, it had just won the thing. It didn't want to fight anyone anymore because it had won the contest. But for the time being, none of the player characters or the players know any of this stuff yet.
Okay guys, I got a pistol, a cheap ballpoint pen, half a pack of cigarettes, 3 condoms, and a pair of handcuffs. Which sounds like a pretty good weekend in Dallas if you ask me. Now let's figure out just where in the hell we are.
The studio is just a single floor, though it's designed to make it feel like it's 2 levels high. The first floor offers us several rooms to start building the mood and making the players, question where they are and what it was that happened to them. One room contains canisters, each containing what looks like a human brain connected to wires. And if the player characters plug one of these canisters into a central speaker mount, a voice begins talking to them. Now, these are really just voice actors that are in the studio, but they pretend to be other victims, each with a different personality, asking why they can't see or feel their arms or legs. One of them pretends to be a player character's sister. Another is a soldier asking how the war is going. The adventure gives us some ideas for 4 brains that the player characters might talk to. Now, because I knew there was a small but definite possibility that my players might just try talking to all of these brains here and wasting a bunch of time, I decided that after the 4th conversation, I would have a mutant or 2 come busting through a ventilation grate, attack the player characters, maybe damaging the machine in the process, that way they couldn't talk to any more of the brains, and just pushing the adventure forward. Thankfully though, my players decided after the 4th brain jar to just keep exploring the rest of this level. Another room has an overgrown garden with what looks to be a broken gardening robot. It's pretty easy to repair because it's really just a remote controlled by a stagehand, and it's meant to be cute, sort of like an R2-D2 but armed with a hedge trimmer.
Yeah, cute. Up until the point that it declared it was harvest time and it snipped off one of my fingers with some gardening shears. I had to bind this thing up with some masking tape that I got out of the supply closet, which, by the way, is freaking terrible for first aid.
There's also a set encounter with a mutant in this room, and this encounter led one of my player characters in the group to getting killed. And because we were only a quarter of the way through this adventure, I pulled out one of the other pre-generated characters and said how they had woken up from their coma first and not knowing where they were or what was going on, had stumbled into this room and they were in this garden room now hiding from the monsters, and they emerged once this monster was defeated. Now, as they're going through this, the player characters' memories are going to awaken as they exit certain rooms, or possibly spurred on by bouts of madness. And this is where we had moments where player characters suddenly are remembering how one of the other player characters had betrayed them in their past, or how two of the player characters were romantically involved. The keepers should also be dropping hints throughout all this, how this spaceship is really just a television set. At any point, if they announce that they're looking for any hidden cameras, they will easily find hidden cameras. They are all over the place around here. But there can also be other things, such as the set builders accidentally left out a takeout menu in one of the rooms, or muddy boot prints from work boots that didn't get cleaned up, or maybe a cup of coffee that someone set down and forgot about, and maybe it's still warm. If a character gets knocked into a wall, you could have that wall crack because it's really just painted drywall. Or a really great listen check, they might hear some of the crew talking behind the set somewhere, on the other side of a wall or something like that. Paul Fricker told me that keepers should not be afraid to drop a lot of hints like these. They will puzzle the player characters because there's a lot of other weird stuff that's going on, and if the player characters they end up digging too deep, the show director might just throw some mutants or other sort of catastrophe at them to take their attention away from whatever it is that they found. But Paul told me that almost nobody ever figured out that this was a television set, and my players didn't at all, though they did believe that they were in some sort of alien, possibly Mego experiment, just kind of drawing from the knowledge they had had from other one-shots that I had run with them before. But the more hints that you drop throughout the course of the adventure, the better the payoff at the end is going to be when the player characters can look back and see how many blatant clues it was that they found but they'd misinterpreted. After unlocking the computer room, they'll discover a dead gray alien. It's made out of foam rubber, and if anyone cuts it open and tastes its brown blood for some reason whatsoever, they'll say that it tastes like molasses because that's what it is. Activating the ship's computer, it sounds like a little British girl, sort of like the Red Queen from Resident Evil, but the character calls itself Father. Father tells them that the ship has sustained some serious damage to its power plant and is in danger of exploding. The access tunnel to the lower habitat level has been damaged and cannot be used by the player characters, so accessing the lower level requires that they fly the shuttle pod down there. The ship shuttle is my favorite gag. The shuttle is pretty much just a flight simulator ride like you'd have at an amusement park. As they're inside and they're dodging space debris, and the simulator just rotates around as stagehands cover up the door that they entered the room through and uncover a different door. So once the ride is complete, they step off of it, believing themselves to be on a different level of this spaceship. Level 2 is far more danger and action-oriented. There's an alien sci-fi computer that they might try to repair, but it's really just a bunch of colored plastic boxes with blinky lights. But a dex check can, reassemble it and get the computer working. Now, one thing, though, that the module did suggest, and I did, is instead of just asking for a roll, I asked each player that was attempting to repair the computer if they wanted to do a die roll or a physical challenge, like, an old episode of Double Dare, which most of my players said that they wanted to do the physical challenge. So I gave them 10d10, and I told them that they had 30 seconds to stack all of them, and I started the countdown the moment they put the first die on top of another one. I also did them as sort of a spectrum of colors, that thinking that maybe the players might believe there was some sort of importance to the order of the dice or something like that, but none of them even thought about that. But the first 3, when they attempted it, they did not pull it off in 30 seconds, so the last player, they finally said, you know what, I'll just do this with a die roll, and they rolled it and they got it. Next, they have to make it through a corridor lined with alien eggs and a floor slippery with slime. Now, these eggs will explode, shooting these little squid-like things at them that burrow painfully beneath the investigator's skin, and these are fired by audience members with joysticks. Now, one interesting thing here is that each character's luck score represents how the audience feels about that character. So the character with the highest luck score is the audience favorite and isn't going to get shot at. Meanwhile, the character with the lowest luck score is the audience's least favorite and is going to be shot at the most. And I really dig the idea that luck is the measure of how the audience feels about them, so I suggest that game masters really lean into this. If a character does something just really awesome or heroic, or maybe just something really funny, have that player roll a d10 and add that number to their luck score to represent that the audience liked that, even though the player isn't going to know why it is, they just got a couple extra points of luck.
The same holds true for any player characters that's being a jerk or a coward, or just does something that the audience doesn't like. Like the keeper could roll just a d10 behind their screen and then just whisper over to the player to reduce their luck by however many points that was, representing how the audience is soured to them.
Fixing the power plant requires that they put these huge liquid-filled cylinders back into place, and they're super heavy, requiring 3 investigators to lift them, and one of them has to make an extreme strength check. The idea being that this ultimately should be an exercise in futility and end in failure. However, I disagree with that, so I made this a hard strength roll for each cylinder because ultimately it doesn't matter if they repair the power plant or not because the ship is ultimately doomed anyway. So if they do pull it off, then great. Maybe the computer just continues the countdown clock like it wasn't fixed at all, much like Mother at the end of Alien, not accepting that Ripley had turned the cooling system back on. Now, finishing up with the power plant, whether they were successful with it or not, the sounds of crashing and alarms come from the central control room, and several mutants are ripping apart the computers, and any power plant cylinders that were installed go crashing to the floor as the ship begins its self-destruct sequence, and the player characters are told that they need to get to the escape pods right now. Now, this is the big finale to the adventure, and those mutants are wanting blood, meaning that they're going to have one hell of a fight in order to get past them and get to the escape pods. The escape pods are also rigged, so know that more than 2 characters are going to be able to escape this adventure. 2 of the pods are just simply fake doors that aren't going to open. Managing to rip them open reveals just some unpainted drywall on the other side of them. 2 more of the pods are dummy pods that will not launch, so a player character getting into a pod must make a luck roll to see if it's a working pod or not, until we know which 2 are the 2 dummy pods. Now, once inside a jettisoning pod, the character should be getting rattled around quite a bit, and I think they should possibly release, going down this long slide that, they have that feeling of acceleration, some sort of, super happy fun slide. Then after a few minutes, the lid just comes off and a smarmy announcer congratulates them for winning in front of a live studio audience, at which point the game master can divulge what is going on and share the character's full background, why they chose to be a contestant on the show. And I suggest that you do this through some sort of video interview that the character made prior to having all their memories wiped, where they're kind of sitting in a chair and telling a little bit about themselves. Then we wrap the show up, thank our audience, and roll the credits, thus ending the adventure. Overall, we had an absolute blast with this scenario, and it was a serious hit for my table. If I was to run it again, I might add air ducts so the player characters might be able to crawl around through different other rooms. And of course, these air ducts are going to kind of wind a little bit more, unnecessarily, and might have certain obstacles inside of them, such as, iris valves that snap shut and mutants crawling around inside of them, or, maybe some mashers, kind of like Galaxy Quest. Now, if for some reason my players did manage to bust through one of the set walls and escape the set, getting backstage where all the scaffolding is, my plan was I was going to have several stage hands that were going to be blasting fire extinguishers at them to simulate, different, smoke and how the air is all cold and there's all this dust and everything like that. And worst case scenario, the show's director cuts to a commercial and he tells the contestants what's really going on, how they are contractually required to finish this show, or else if they don't, they're going to be turned into mutants for the next round of contestants to go through it. So they have to do this because they've signed a contract saying that they'll do this. Now, thankfully, I didn't have to do that plan, but I did have that one in the back of my head just in case. The only real criticism I have of this scenario is some rather annoying editing relics, the placeholder symbols for referencing page numbers. Not a big deal, but they did stand out, and they should be pretty easy to fix. But outside of that minor complaint, this was a banger Call of Cthulhu adventure. You can find it on DriveThruRPG as both a PDF and print on demand. If you are looking for a fun, single-session science fiction one-shot offering paranoia and one hell of a closing twist, I suggest checking it out.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews or how-tos, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, gamers, you have a great day. My favorite part of this adventure was at the very end finale, when all those monsters were in the room and we had to get off to the escape pod, because one of the player characters just totally screwed over the rest of the party and abandoned them and ran past the monsters and just leaped into an escape pod. Now, you had already determined beforehand that pods 5 and 6 were the 2 dummy ones where the doors wouldn't even open for them, but the player character, she jumped into pod number 2. But then you asked her to roll a luck roll, and she had burned all her luck earlier, so she only had a luck of 2%. So of course she completely failed that roll, meaning that the pod wouldn't go. So she crawls out of that pod, gets into pod 1, you ask her to roll a luck again, and once again she totally bombs that. So she's about to come crawling out of that to get into pods 3 or 4, which are the 2 pods that actually do work. However, the 2 other player characters survivors had finished up with those monsters. They had came running and they had jumped into pods 3 and 4 and got the hell out of there. So the last time that we even saw the betraying player characters, they're banging on the door of pod number 5, trying to figure out why the freaking door wouldn't open, as 2 of those monsters came in through the door behind her, and it just faded to black. Kind of a good lesson to never ever screw over the rest of your party, especially if your luck isn't only 2%.